And our first speaker, she is, we are learning from the best, you could say. Learning from the best is important, and she is one of the best, definitely. She is called Frau Dr. Change, oder sie ist auch die nachhaltige Provokateurin, wird sie auch oft genannt. Sie hat einen TED-Talk über Nachhaltigkeit, der wirklich, wenn man danach schaut, ungefähr 1 Million Leute gesehen haben und angeklickt haben. Jetzt ist sie auch im kleineren Rahmen für uns da, das ist natürlich besonders schön. Sie hat 2 Firmen, eine in New York, eine in Melbourne, und sie hat eine UnSchool. Und zwar wird da über auch wie Wissen angeeignet wird, nachgedacht, und zwar auf einer Farm in Portugal. Auch da kann man das Programm mal anschauen, was sie da alles macht. And now we're very, very happy to have her here. It's Leyla Acaroglu, and I don't know where she came from today, but welcome on stage.
Thank you. Thank you. I came from my farm in Portugal, so not too far. Not from Australia, which would be very far. I'm really happy to be here with you all today. Education is what has made me who I am, and also what is a deep passion to completely transform in my career, in the work that I do. So I studied design, product design. I wanted to have a not boring job. That was my life goal when I was young. But I ended up quitting design school because I felt like I was learning how to create a really big problem for the world, which was waste and things that people didn't need. And so I actually ended up becoming a sociologist and really wanted to understand why humans are so messed up. And so then I ended up combining these 2 careers to do a PhD in transformative change. I'm not going to talk about that. That would be very boring. Instead, I'm going to talk about the last 15 years of my career, which has been about how do we design a future that works better than today. And I would say that most people who are interested in education are interested in supporting the transformation of our current systems, education, and industry, to bring about a future that is by far better than what we have managed to create. And in order to do that, some of the things that I've done is to create tools for change. So, as I said, I'm a designer, and I've designed many different types of learning experiences. So I've designed animations where there's like talking cell phones or having existential crises because they've been abandoned. I've designed educational experiences with massive institutions. And also I've created a lot of gamified toolkits that people can use, many of which you can grab online. And why I've done this is because in the years of kind of personally trying to affect change, I've realized that most people avoid problems. And so I like to teach people how to love problems. Because when you love something, you really treat it differently to when you hate it. So I like to encourage people to go on dates with their problems and to really be the same level of inquisition you do on that first date. So where did you grow up? You know, what's your favorite, blah, blah, blah. Because when you start to do that, you have what? A curious mind. And you're absorbing information. And rather than laying blame and pointing fingers and saying, well, you know, the problem is, and then just walking away, we are in this deep, curious, excited mindset. And when we love problems, we learn that often, deep within the problem, has its own solution. And that's something about education, and the entire education system that we have today is, whilst it is an incredible enabler of change, it is also an incredible disabler of possibility. And this is something I want to talk with you about. A little bit back to myself though, I am like very obsessed with sustainability and you know, conserving the planetary system that sustains us all. I'm not actually going to talk about sustainability today. You can go online and find like many talks about that. I want to really focus on creative change in the education space because it is actually one of my core passions, and it's why I actually started a school called the UnSchool. It's for adults. We help people who are career transitioning in learning the tools that are going to support them in the path that they want to live. And we do it in a very fun and experiential way. And it's called the UnSchool because, and don't take offense to this, because I know you're all teachers and educators, but we help undo the damage that mainstream education did. So essentially, I am a product. I've got a PhD. I went through the whole thing, and there were so many moments where I could have just quit and be spat out because I didn't learn the way the teachers taught me. I'm like a rebel. I was always getting in trouble. But I somehow found a way to get myself through that system and come out the other side marginally intact. And it was such a motivator. By the time I finished my PhD, I was like, oh my gosh, this whole thing needs to change. And this is one of the motivators to the UnSchool, but also in how do we teach young people the tools for the future has been like this massive inspiration for me, because when I keep meeting these adults who come to the UnSchool, who can be like 25-year-olds who have graduated at the top of their school, they go and get their first job, and then they come home after like 2 months and they're like, oh my God, is this going to be my life? Because they're coming through this system that's just kind of eating them up. Or we have 65-year-olds who work for Walmart who are like, I'm going to disrupt these mofos from the inside. And these kinds of people who, they have this passion to see something different and they need the tools to do that. And unfortunately, our education systems do not equip people with the tools for life. We don't even teach people about taxation, which is the one thing you have to do in life. Participate in the tax system. So the UnSchool really helps give people those tools, but more so it also just gives me actual positivity, because every time I meet anybody who comes to this school, I'm like, from all over the world, I think, oh my gosh, we're gonna be okay. We're gonna figure this out, because there's so many people who are passionate and committed and actively participating in the change in the world. So education is obviously one of the unifying factors of humanity. We've all been educated in some way. But one of the big problems is that the schooling system that we've created has a legacy of linearity. We teach people linear ideas in a world that is very much based on systems. So in the UnSchool, it's all about systems, sustainability, and design. We teach people how to think creatively, about how to understand complex systems, and of course about the science around sustainability. And we do it all in a very experiential and fun way. It's very hands-on. And it ended up resulting in me being awarded an actual title from the United Nations called Champion of the Earth, which I am always asking them for a cape, so that, you know, I really can have my superhero status, but I haven't received one. And just so you know, I'm saying cape, not cake. Because someone recently told me that they thought I said cake. And I'm like, no, I don't want a cake, I want a cape, so I can be a superhero for the planet. But actually, what I realized in this is that we are all superheroes for the planet, right? Every single day we do things, and those things have actions. And actions, as we know, are much louder than words. And as a species, we're mimicking and modeling the behavior of those that are around us. So when we're trying to address big problems like sustainability or inequality, the actions we take to address those or to accidentally reinforce them is what permeates through each generation. So when we can challenge that through our disruption of the status quo, then we can start to see these shifts and changes. So what does education for the future look like? I hope it doesn't look anything like the past. You shouldn't be all sitting in these nicely ordered rows here. I should make you move all of your chairs because you look way too linear and structured, or you should all stand up on your chairs. But no, actually don't for the moment. I'm the first speaker. I don't want to ruin everything for the organizers. But how do we equip young minds, or even not so young minds, with the tools to create a future that completely absolves all of these big, complex challenges we have, like climate change, ocean plastic waste, the 6th great extinction, inequality? What about gender bias? Like, how do we give people the tools to solve those problems? And to solve them in a way where they love the problems, rather than, as I said at the beginning, spend a lot of their energy trying to avoid them. One project I did with Finland, which they keep saying has the best education system in the world, was actually to try, I just was speaking to a Finnish man down here, was to actually do a project around this. So what are the kind of tools that teenagers about to go into their secondary education, what kind of tools do they need for the future of work? And we created this toolkit. It's called the Circular Classroom. It's free, it's online, you can download it all. Essentially what we did was we created 3 main units around creativity and design. We created one around systems, And then we also created one around sustainability. There are videos, but for me, the most interesting thing is we actually designed it with students and teachers. So we did this experiential learning workshop where we had educators and students come together and do all the activities and then come up with new ideas for how they would want to learn those activities. So when you download any of the packs, you're actually getting content that was co-designed or co-created with the students and the educators facilitating this stuff. And it's also mapped against the Finnish education system, so it talks about how it could fit in your biology classes, how it could fit in your math classes, and you get hours of me talking and translated into Swedish. So basically, one of the things that came out of that, and as I think we can all agree is common knowledge in education, is that we all learn as humans through motivation. If you're not motivated, then the likelihood of learning is a lot lower. Right? I always say it's easier to teach someone how to cook when they're hungry. Right? If somebody's not hungry, they're less likely to be motivated to figure out how to feed themselves. So with education, the more we can introduce motivation as the base foundation, the more we can ignite change. And so in the Finnish example, when I spoke with young people how they were learning things, they were all learning random things by themselves, like Korean, because K-pop's really cool right now. And they were learning that themselves by going to YouTube, using the apps. They were motivated and they were learning very quickly. And so we wanted to try and find a way to bring that kind of motivation into the classroom and into this whole designed set where there's lots of really beautiful, cool action and reflection-based activities. Anyway, you can download them all. The whole idea around the work that I do like this, I'm doing a similar system right now for Thailand, is to basically disrupt the status quo by designing new things that make the old obsolete. So when we come to looking at curriculums and the linear and siloed nature of education, it's very easy to say, oh, we have to wait for government to fix this. Rather than see that we are the ones who interpret this information and have the agency to ignite within the minds of one individual or 100 individuals the tools that give them the agency to make change, right? So you can take, I was saying you can teach physics by getting someone to sit at a desk and learn things, or you can give them a basketball and go and tell them to put it in a hoop. You can learn in so many different ways, and for me, this is the future of education, is this cognitive engagement, this extremely engaging, hyper-motivating approach. But we are still stuck very much in the worldview that Newton gave us, right? So the linear approach to education is where, science, who's a science teacher? Anyone? Okay, I like you guys, don't be offended. But it is true that we learn how to be very linear in our process of science. We take a hypothesis, we have an aim and a method, and we test it, and then we come up with an outcome, okay? This has been very useful for humanity, don't get me wrong. But it is not useful when you're going, okay, ocean plastic waste, how do we solve it? Let's just do more recycling. Only 9% of all plastic ever produced has ever been recycled. And China just decided to not receive any of the world's recycling anymore. So 18 months ago, the world's recycling market completely collapsed. So right now, if you're recycling something, it's probably not being recycled. So what happens is we have like the best case linear solution does not work in the complex, dynamic, globalized world that we live in. And Newton's ideas from 350 years ago were extremely useful, but they're not quite relevant today in the sense that we now have 7.5 billion people. That's a lot of people requiring a lot of resources and wanting a lot of technology and wanting to be able to fly to Malta for a vacation. And so all of this shift in the way that we live in the world today requires us to shift the way we see the world and we live within it. So Newton's mechanical worldview resulted in reductionism. We are part of a linear system. And what we are seeing right now is that we are transforming our economy, our education system from the linear, reductive mindset of take, make, waste to one of circular and systems. So this idea that we have in our production world, when we produce anything, clothes, this pointy thingy, we literally have this linear economy that produces goods and services. It's extremely unsustainable. So the transition that we're seeing right now is to a circular systems model that internalizes the externalities that the current production system has. And when you look at education, what we've done is we've created a system that fulfills the linear production model. Paola Ferrer called this the banker-style education system. If you haven't read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I recommend at least reading the Wikipedia entry on it. It's an incredible work about the industrial nature of education and how we as educators need to see ourselves as leaders of learning versus instillers of knowledge from the past. And for me, this is also where we can learn from nature, the systems that sustain us, the thing that gives us nutrients and sustenance to live. Nature is one of the most incredible regenerative systems, and I hate to break it to you all, you are part of nature. You put nature in your body every day, you breathe air, you eat food, yet somehow we forgot to teach this. And we forgot to realize that if we destroy these systems, then we won't be able to sustain ourselves. So the relationship between nature as a model for the regenerative future that we can design and the way we teach or engage with young people is very intrinsically linked. So I have only a few minutes, so I'm going to get really fast. Are you ready? If I wasn't already fast enough for you, okay. It's my Australianness. All right, so nature needs chaos to survive. We know that. Ecosystems thrive through diversity. We know that the diversity in the classroom is going to create a much better outcome, collaboration, some sort of complexity. These all support an emergent outcome that's better than before. So we need to shift the way we teach from a linear to a systems thinking. And this requires understanding that there's infinite possibilities, like if you look through a telescope and you saw all the stars in the sky, you might be overwhelmed by the universe. But if you look through a microscope, you'll see that what's inside a microscope is a mirror of what's inside the telescope. And the ability to think in these two dimensions is one of the foundations of systems thinking. And what we do in systems thinking is we evolve the idea that there is one obvious part of the system. We know that every single obvious bit is held up by a big mass of something else. And so we are constantly seeking to understand what that is. This is that curiosity mindset. We see that everything is interconnected, and we choose to not see parts in isolation, but as a whole made up of parts. And that one shift from parts to the whole changes everything. Like, my body would not exist, my hand would not work if I cut it off, that would be weird. My brain would not work if I took it out. I'm an interconnected system that requires the whole thing to work. And this kind of thinking means that when we see a problem, we see it as part of a bigger system, not just one individual component. And this way of seeing phenomena or the world, the way we teach, the way we interact, the way the world works, the problems, it completely agentizes you. Because you're no longer a victim of complexity, you are now a participant in it. And this builds wisdom. Because when you approach something with systems thinking, you are basically deeply concerned about what's going on. Like, why is it like that this thing over here is being affected by this thing? I'm not going to go into the full details, but there's feedback loops and there's all of these rules, like there is no blame in systems thinking. If everything's interconnected, you can't blame anything. So there's these tools that help you see the world in a more complex, dynamic way and to participate within that. And in systems thinking, we use tools like systems mapping that helps anyone understand relationships versus the obvious parts. And at the outcome of this, what we get is new emergent systems. So when you talk about innovation or creativity, it's the emergent outcome of the complex environment that you've created, that diversity that nature gives us. So most of the problems we have today were yesterday's solutions. So the main goal of education should be to equip people with the tools to not make tomorrow's problems. And that's where systems thinking really comes in as one of the core elements of that we can design a future that works better than today. But the only way we make change is when people change. And when we change the way we see the world and the way we interact with it, then it influences change. It has that beautiful ability to ripple out across the world. I'm a big fan of Russell Arkoff as well. I strongly recommend looking into his work. He's a prominent systems thinker from a while ago. And I love this. He always says it's better to solve the right problem wrong than the wrong problem right, which is something that we accidentally do all the time, and we don't teach people that being wrong is actually part of getting to being right. We say, oh, look, if you don't get the A+ on the test, then you haven't done the right thing. That's not the way the world works. We are a dynamic being. We respond to experiences. And so if we can find ways to do less teaching and more learning collaboratively with our students, with our peers, then we can help make the change that we need to see. The shifts that we need to see in the world come through us first and foremost acknowledging that the linear economy that got us here has to be converted into a systems of regeneration. And the beautiful thing about being an educator is, I like to say, we're midwives of the mind of the future. Because every single one of you can think of that educator who changed your life. Every educator I've ever worked with, I've done lots of research, there's always that one person who motivated you to do this job. And so that is really what we can be for other people. We can be the person that helps change the way they see the world and the way they live in the world. And when we look at creativity, this elusive thing that we're always talking about in education, it comes when people are willing to deviate from the standard expectations, when they're willing to challenge the status quo. And so for me, this is really about designing a future and using the tool of design. And when I say that, I don't mean like, you know, what you're probably evoking the imagery of design. I mean, everything in the world is designed, from the way that chair is making you comfortable or not comfortable, through to the fact that now technology's created this thing called tech neck. You know, everyone's got this problem now. Everything in the world influences us. We're in this dynamic relationship with the designed world. The education system was designed to support the Industrial Revolution, and we are now in the point where we need to create an education system that supports a revolution for sustainability and for a positive and regenerative future. So I'll leave you with this idea. We are all citizen designers of the future. It doesn't matter how old you are. We are all participating through our actions or inactions in designing the world we want to live in. So I challenge you to think about those micro or macro changes that you can bring to your practice and to your profession and even into your daily life to help bring about the kind of world that you want your kids to grow up in, or that you want to see be part of a positive future. Thank you so much.
Impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leyla. Schöner Gedanke, wir sind alle Hebammen und helfen, Geburtshelferinnen eigentlich oder Geburtshelfer.